Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 2 Episode 7, Where Pleasant Fountains Lie. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review Star Trek Lower Decks. So I have to start with a spoiler warning for the latest episode of Lower Decks Season 2 Episode 7. If you haven't seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So, I really like this episode. I think this is probably my second favorite episode of the season behind Episode 2. It's the first episode I've seen since Episode 2 that I really liked and appreciated. Now, it's different though because I didn't think this episode was hilarious. It didn't have any like laugh out loud, die laughing moments like I think it was it last week's episode or the week before, but the one where they had Armors, like that was a laugh out loud, like die laughing moment, but the rest of the episode wasn't all that great and it was really sloppy and I had issues with it. And even Episode 2, I loved it because it was hilarious and it had a lot of laugh out loud moments it was a great comedy. Whereas this episode wasn't so like laugh out loud hilarious. There were a lot of funny moments in it though. Like there's a lot of chuckling moments. Like I chuckled a lot in this episode, but I didn't like die laughing like I did at the Armistice moment. But I still like the episode better because for me this works. I always talk about Lower Decks in terms of straddling that line of being a funny comedy but still being a Star Trek, true to a Star Trek show. And I think this episode pulls it off really well, which is why I really liked it, because I think this is a very interesting, well-structured episode that helps further develop the characters, whereas a lot of the previous episodes in the season I felt was really messy or went way too over the top and I couldn't buy as an actual Star Trek show, or the plot just didn't seem to work and the character beats were kind of things that we already knew, that they were just reinforcing things that we knew, where I felt like this actually furthered the characters in many ways, and plus it just explored them in interesting ways, and even minor characters such as the Chief Engineer Phillips, who was never actually, even within the senior staff, he was never presented as one of the staples of the senior staff. He was just kind of slowly appeared throughout season 1 and appeared every once in a while, and it appears now after this episode that maybe he will become one of the major players in the senior staff. But anyway, it's interesting because I've railed against, and the show itself even pointed out, the whole structure of constantly having Mariner and Boimler go off on their own adventure while Tendi and Rutherford do their own thing. And this episode seems to fall back on that, which is something that I really did not like. But I'm actually not bothered by it in this episode because I like the interactions between Boimler and Mariner so much, and I think this episode explores and advances their relationship that it makes me appreciate it, so I'm not upset or disappointed that they put these two together. And as far as the Rutherford-Tendi thing, they didn't really pair them up in this episode. It was mainly Rutherford. It was mainly about Phillips, honestly, and Rutherford was with Phillips, and it was only at the end of the episode where we see Tendi come in after she thinks that Rutherford is dead, and I did really appreciate and like that stuff. So I actually like that as well. And typically I really hate the Rutherford and Tendi pairing, but this seemed atypical of what they've done before, because the reason why I usually hate it is because they usually just repeat the same thing over and over again and the characters don't really work for me. But here I felt like this felt new and fresh and the characters really did work for me. So we get two plots basically in this episode. So let me start first with the whole Chief Engineer Phillips and his family background. I actually love the concept of this episode. First of all, we're actually introduced that Phillips comes from a world where everyone acts like all royalty and everything. And apparently the dragons live on this world, and apparently he is supposed to be the prince of the world, and his mother is really upset and pissed off that he chose to abandon that and join Starfleet. And apparently there's a rule, and this is where I think is a good comedic moment, because this is a silly rule, but it works in for comedy, is that if Phillips has sex, then automatically he becomes the king. And so his mother's constantly trying to trick him into having sex with someone. Which I think is a funny concept, and I think it really worked. But it took, like, the first time I watched this episode, I was not sure whether or not this world he came from was, like, if he was an alien, if there was aliens living on this world that had this society that just so happened to emulate, medieval times. And if that was the case, that would be a bit far-fetched to me, and plus they all look human. But I thought maybe it wasn't an alien world, maybe it was colonists, and I'm sure those who actually paid attention to the episode might have noticed this the first time they watched the episode, that they did in fact state this, but I had to watch it a second time to be clear, because Rutherford does throw out a line that, that's the world that was colonized by those Renfair types. So these are humans who colonized the world. Apparently dragons already existed in this world, which is, I don't know, that's not too far-fetched. We've seen some crazy things. Maybe they're not dragons exactly, but dragon-like. And so enough like dragons where they call them dragons. And so a bunch of Renfair types decided to colonize that world and create a whole society that is modeled off of, medieval England. But the funny thing is, and so that is an interesting concept, and that's a concept I totally buy. To me, I actually really appreciate that they said that it wasn't, instead of trying to pretend that they're aliens, it just so happened, because that would be dumb. But I find it a lot more feasible and interesting and funny that it was a bunch of Renaissance festival types. That, because if you ever been, I've been to Renaissance Festival before. They have one locally where I grew up, very close nearby. And if you ever been there before, like, everyone goes out of their way to be like, to like, and it's not how they actually like talked, I'm sure, in these medieval times. It's more of an exaggerated, like, they exaggerate all the speeches, hither, there, and all that kind of thing. And so the concept that an entire colony, entire world would have this exaggerated, romanticized version of what medieval times were like, and be living it out in an entire colony, and structure an entire society off of it, is funny, and I buy it. It's a very interesting concept, and so that Phillips comes from this world was very interesting. I am disappointed we didn't get to see any dragons, but hopefully they will do that in future episodes. Maybe we'll actually visit this world. But anyway, and so, I gotta be honest, when this character of his mother first appeared, and when he said, "Oh, hello, mother," and they made it clear that it was his mother, I was worried that they were gonna do a Loxana Troy type character, because at first that's how she came off of, as like, Loxana Troy. And you could say in a way they did kind of model her off of Loxana a little bit, but it wasn't so, because I thought it was going to be like a clear, this is Loxana, they're just giving her a different name, which it isn't the case, because the thing with Loxana is that she constantly was trying to have sex herself with other men, but this character is trying to get her son to have sex. so that's different, and she was nowhere near as annoying as Loxana, and I actually liked the way that they used her. Now, she comes on board under the pretense of, oh, our ships are damaged and in need of repair, so I'm asking your help as an engineer. And so he's willing to help them because she refuses to acknowledge or accept his life choice, his career path to become an engineer. So when she appears to at least somewhat tentatively, like, yes, I need your help as an engineer, that makes him really happy. He's more willing to participate, but of course, as we learn, that's all part of the deception, which to me was kind of obvious from the very beginning, that because they first throw out the gauntlet and they mention that she's constantly trying to trick him into having sex, so that's always in the back of my mind when I'm watching this episode. But anyway, so he asked Rutherford to come on board with him. And I like how we get the scene with Rutherford and Tendi, and we get this line that's one of my favorite lines of the episode that I thought was hilarious, because Rutherford's doesn't really want to go to another ship, and he's really nervous about it, and Tendi says, oh, you should get outside your comfort zone every once in a while. And my favorite line is when Rutherford, but I like my comfort zone. It's very comfortable. It's a zone that's very comfortable. Anyway, I don't know. It's silly, but I just thought that was funny. But anyway, so they go over there and they repair the ship and everything seems to be A-okay. And then Freeman calls Phillips back to the ship to give him an out to try to get away from his annoying mother. But when he gets back, he's like, actually, it seems to be working out now. And she seems to be appreciating me as an engineer. And then a huge explosion happened, which I actually thought was a great scene. The way it played, it was like shocking. It was like I was totally shocked by it. But then we're told that Rutherford and Philip's mother died in this explosion, and that's when I knew that obviously this is bullshit. There's no way that they're gonna kill Rutherford off like this, and especially an explosion is not something. I mean, they could do the whole Shax thing, but again, I'm trying to forget about that. But still, I didn't really buy that they would just kill Rutherford off. But as soon as Phillips came to Freeman and was like, I had to resign from Starfleet. I need to denounce my I need to become king because my mother's dead, so I need to have sex so I can officially be king. As soon as that happened, I was like, obviously this is a trick. I mean, it was beyond obvious. It was like smack in the face, so much so that it actually bothered me a little bit that none of the characters in the show even floated this idea. Like Freeman, like she should have instantly seen as soon as he resigned, been like, well, maybe this is your mother trying to trick you. I suppose you could say that could seem insensitive because he probably, it appears that he just lost his mother, but it still seems like something Phillips himself even should have considered. That it was too obvious because his mother was getting exactly what she wanted, and I was like, something doesn't seem right here. But and of course, Tendi is the only one who can figure out that Rutherford's still alive, and I do kind of buy that though, because it is interesting that she uses his cybernetic implant to locate him, and she thinks that she's blaming herself. She's like, oh, this is all my fault. He died. I forced him to work outside his comfort zone. And she gets there, and I love the scene where he's just having a feast, and he's like, hey, Tendi, what's up? And then they piece it together that this was all a trick by his mother, who of course is also still alive, to get him to copulate, so then he would have no choice but to be king. And so Rutherford runs to try to save him, and I do think it's interesting that he was going to have sex with both the male and female guard. It's actually funny because during this episode, they were hinting at, the female guard was like making strong overtures to him. Like I kind of like, I can't remember exactly what innuendo she said, but he had said something about fixing the engineering, from the bottom up. He's like, oh, you can do this to my bottom anytime. And he's like, yeah, no thank you. you. That was funny too. I didn't like the concept of the constantly trying to get him to have sex. But anyway, I thought at that moment, I was like, how come it's just the women that are flirting with him? It's just they're promoting this heteronormative thing where it has to just be the women that have sex with him. But then this episode corrected me and said, well, actually no, because he was going to have sex with both a woman and a man, which I thought I appreciated. But anyway, he apparently can't get it up, which does make a lot of sense, actually. First of all, he's a virgin and he's quite old and has never done this before. And secondly, he just lost his mother. He's still grieving and he's under a lot of pressure. Plus, having two people there might make it a bit more intimidating, and plus they're really hot. So I think that all tracks and makes sense. I don't like how they tried to play it for laughs, and they tried to make it out like he was less than for not being able to get aroused, which seems like what they were doing, but that's just a really minor complaint. But so Rutherford, it was kind of funny the way that his mother was like, haha, our Garnets have been trained from birth to skip foreplay. Which is like a funny way to have a ticking clock or raise the tension or whatever. But then, of course, Rutherford gets there in time because he wasn't able to get it up and was able to stop them. And they were like, yes, I remain dry. It was an effective storyline that I thought was a great character story that was at the same time funny. So I really appreciated that. And then, of course, Tindy, apologizes for forcing him outside his comfort zone. He's like, what, are you kidding? I loved it, and it was amazing. And he's just like, yeah, but I thought you were dead. He's like, oh, that's just all part of Starfleet. You gotta just deal with that. She's like, okay, haha. That was a great character moment between these two characters, something that I did actually really appreciate. So I very much like this storyline. And so now let me go over to the other storyline, which I also loved. I also thought was great, which was with Boimler and Mariner, where we see, of course, Boimler's like bragging about going on this mission to hunt giant centipedes or whatever, and he's like, oh, I'm on my training on the Titan. And it's obvious that Mariner's getting irritated with him constantly bringing up the Titan, and but then it finds out that he gets reassigned to transport this evil supercomputer back to Starfleet. Now, the whole episode begins with Freeman going to his planet, and I like how this is actually played seriously. That this planet that was devastated by war because they were controlled by this evil supercomputer, and Starfleet stepped in order to take it away and take it back to the Daystrom Institute to be studied. And it was kind of funny though how I kept trying to trick Ransom. And Ransom, of course, saw right through it. It was like, oh, you almost had me there. And it slams it down on him like that. That was a funny moment. I love the supercomputer thing about how it kept trying to, just jack me up to a computer, kept trying to plug it into a computer. That's okay, just throw me over to that console over there. But anyway, so Mariner and Boimler get assigned to transport it back to the Daystrom Institute, and I knew that something was going to happen to make it become an important character again, because you don't just throw them in there, these characters in there, and not do anything with it. And this episode does rely on the shuttlecraft crash, a cliche that I think is really tired and overused. It's almost up there to me with the whole falsely accused crew member or a holodeck goes wrong type scenario. But I actually didn't really mind it that much. I was a little bothered, of course, because whenever I see that, I'm like, oh god, they're doing this again. But I like what they do after it, and again, like I like what this does for the characters of um, Mariner and Boimler. Now, one thing I have to say is that whoever wrote this episode clearly hates black liquor. That became very apparent because when after they crashed, they're like trying to get all the stuff from the replicators, but the replicator is only capable of making black licorice with it, which Mariner is very disgusted by. Hey, I love black licorice. I don't care what anyone says. Actually, what I would like even more is black jelly beans. So I couldn't identify with this, although if I'm trapped on a desert world, of course I'm going to want water rather than black licorice. But I didn't appreciate all the hate thrown at black licorice. But whatever, it's not for everyone. I can understand. Anyway, so the evil computer gets free, of course, and is able to try to trick them the whole time, and it is funny. It's like, hey, just plug me into the computer. I can get that water working for you the whole time. And they're like, hey, you shut up. And then Mariner just wants to bury it somewhere and leave it, but Boimler's like, that's inhumane. We're Starfleet, and that makes a lot of sense. That's good for their interaction. But we see the tensions rise between Boimler and Mariner, and the supercomputer, of course, part of it is manipulative. It tries to divide people and get them to infight, so of course it latches on to that, and apparently it was able to briefly hook up to an iPad and download enough to know that Mariner was the one who made Boimler go on this mission, and that she went to ransom and kind of got him demoted. And I do believe that was a huge dick move for her to do, and I think it is. And the fact that she is really pissed off with how he keeps bringing up the Titan is because it's her own insecurities and her own need to kind of control Boimler, I feel, where she felt abandoned by him, and that's why she kind of rejects everything he's saying. But he actually did learn something from the Titan, and that was a huge part of his experience, and he did grow from it. So the fact that she's very dismissive of it, I think, she's not being a very good friend, and she is being a bit selfish, and especially going to ransom, like that was a huge dick move. So I'm actually a little bit on Boimler's side when he gets really pissed off about it and starts, attacking her in her sleep and being like, well, what the hell? Why did you do this to me? But at the same time, Mariner makes a good point that he's falling into the supercomputer's trap. This is exactly what the supercomputer wants. They want them to fight amongst themselves, and it's trying to divide them. And so she runs off with the supercomputer, is like, you're in timeout until you... In fact, but she uses this to say, oh, this shows that you actually didn't learn anything on the Titan, and you're just as bad as always because you're letting yourself be manipulated by a supercomputer, which is kind of dickish of her to say that. But anyway, so eventually they get into a full-on fight because they find the ship that the supercomputer says that he can use to get them rescued, and Boimler's like, yeah, let's do it, but she's like, of course not, he's just going to use that to do evil stuff. And they get in a huge fight over it, and he actually ends up phasering her, which was like, I was like, wow, shit. He full on just phasered her, and then took the supercomputer and hooked it up to the computer. It's like, yes, just hook me up over here. And the whole time I'm thinking, no, Boimler, you're an idiot. And so this is where, of course, Mariner was absolutely correct. And when she wakes up, she's like, no, Boimler, you moron, you're going to give in to this supercomputer. And we get the scene where he does hook it up to the navigational system, and the supercomputer grows all these little tentacles, and we see this flash. It's like, oh, now I have all my dreams drones and I'm going to take over the planet and then the system, you idiots, let yourself be manipulated by me. Ha ha ha. And then Bournemouth's like, no, actually, no, I just used you. I just hooked you up to the lights and used your battery to send a distress signal. And then Boimler apologizes to Marilyn, saying, "Oh, sorry, I phasered you and did that, but I had to convince the evil supercomputer that I believed him, and that his manipulation was working, and in fact, he manipulated the supercomputer." And I love this for several reasons. First of all, it shows I was sick of the same repeated storylines that we got throughout most of the show, that of Boimler being an idiot and Mariner being so much smarter and better, and that Boimler thinks he's all hot shit, but he's actually a moron who doesn't know what he's doing, and that got really repetitive and old to me. And so I love that he's the one who outsmarted the evil computer and not Mariner, that he's the one that figured it out. It shows that he has grown since his time on the Titan. And the other thing I love about this is that Mariner herself sees this. And so it actually makes the whole storyline, the whole episode really work for me. The fact that she did underestimate Boimler. She did demean his experience on the Titan as much as like, oh, you can't handle centipedes. I'm going to tell Ransom to go behind your back and tell him not to send you there. And it made her look at him in a different way and appreciate him more and say, hey, maybe your time at the Titan did actually help you grow, and maybe you are a smarter, better person. She did, when she found out that he tricked the computer like that, she really appreciated that. I think her respect for him went up a lot, because that is the kind of thing that she would do. And so she could see that he is in fact learning and getting better. And so I like that. I like that in the friendship and in the relationship. And then of course they had the whole scene where they're taking the evil computer back to Daysterman's Institute, and it's like, oh, I see the error of my ways now. I'm deleting all my manipulative subroutines. I can join Starfleet. I want to be the next 7 of 9. And then they just lock it up and this thing at the Institute, and it's like, yo, it is, I will destroy Starfleet. And then they have all the other evil supercomputers right next to it going, no, you're not going to destroy Starfleet. Oh, I'm going to I love that. That was hilarious. So that really, really worked for me. Now, the whole time I was hearing this evil supercomputer, which I love this character, I was like, that voice, who's doing the voice acting for it? It sounds so familiar, but I couldn't place it, and I was just wondering throughout the whole episode. So I finally, just before recording this, I looked up who it is. Now, I know a lot of you probably already know, but I didn't know while I was watching it until just now. It's Jeffrey Combs, and that makes me actually appreciate it a hell of a lot more. I love Jeffrey Combs, and it's so great to see him return to Star Trek. Jeffrey Combs, of course, played Wei Yun and Brunt, but who cares about Brunt, on Deep Space Nine, and then Shran on Enterprise, arguably the best character on Enterprise. So Jeffrey Combs and Wei Yun, of course, is one of the best villains in all of Star Trek, and it's mainly because of Jeffrey Combs and his performance. So to hear him return to Star Trek and playing such the evil computer character, that's so great. And to be clear, even before I learned it was Jeffrey Combs, I thought that whoever was doing the voice acting was doing a great job at it. I was like, yeah, and that's why it caught my attention. This must be some really good actor. I must know who this is. And it is, of course, Jeffrey Combs. Amazing. It is so great. I love that they brought him back for this. So anyway, my rating for... God, what's the title of this episode? Where Pleasant Fountains Lie. Out of 10, I'm gonna give this a 9. Excellent. Actually, yeah, I almost, at first, when I first came on, I was going to give it an 8, but talking about it more and seeing it, just how well everything worked and how much funnier it is, I'm going to give this a 9. I think this is one of the better episodes of Lower Decks overall. I really liked it. I really appreciate it. Not every episode has to be a laugh out loud. In fact, I appreciate this episode a lot more because it was not crazy over the top, like a lot of these previous episodes were. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the prank calling Armors thing, but some of the other stuff that they've done that's just like, don't get me started on the Shax thing, and all this other stuff that just seems like way over the top and seems to shatter like what a canon, realistic Star Trek show should be like, really annoys me and bothers me, and this felt more grounded, more even though it had this evil supercomputer, but of course we've seen evil supercomputers on Trek all the time, and so, that in itself is kind of a cliche. So I love that they latched onto that and made fun of it, but they did it in a way that wasn't like over the top and actually worked for the characters and worked for the story. So yeah, I thought this episode really worked. Anyway, that is it for my review of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 2, Episode 7. Be sure to check out my channel as I continue to cover Lower Decks every week, as well as covering other Star Trek shows on my channel and other shows like The Expanse, Better Call Saul, and Star Wars Clone Wars. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.